Politics in Tennessee has always had its share of drama. It is a state with a rich and often turbulent political history. The past few years produced a distinct outcome.
The story mirrored a Hollywood screenplay. This exceeded backroom deals and routine political disputes. The story exposed humanity's greed, deliberate deception, and severe abuse of public trust. It reached the state capitol and extended to the White House. And it left many people asking a very simple yet profound question. Where is the justice in all of this?
The story revolves around a company called Phoenix Solutions. But Phoenix Solutions was not a real company. Federal prosecutors would later describe it as a phantom, a front. It was created, they argued, for one purpose: to illegally funnel taxpayer money into the pockets of powerful political figures.
The scheme was clever, it was audacious, and for a time, it worked. It took a quiet, determined investigation by the FBI to begin to pull back the curtain. Their findings stunned veteran political observers statewide and nationwide and exposed a coordinated conspiracy.
This involves betrayal and shifting loyalties. It involves a public fall from grace, criminal convictions, and then an almost unbelievable intervention from the highest office in the land. Two of the key figures walked away with their freedom, their sentences erased by a presidential pardon. But one person, the one who decided to cooperate with the government, was initially left to face prison time alone. The irony was not lost on anyone following the case.
It presented a scenario so unusual that it forced a federal judge to make an unprecedented decision in the name of fairness. Today marks January 6, 2026, during the production of this documentary. Indeed, the dust has not yet settled. In fact, it has been kicked up again by a recent court ruling that has once again put this case in the headlines.
The story of Phoenix Solutions reflects institutional rot within local politics. This serves as a case study in power, ethics, and the justice system when the public looks away through ignorance or time and daily life pressure. It demands answers about punishment, pardon, and the distortion of justice through political influence and connections.
At the center of this storm were three well-known figures in Tennessee Republican politics. The first was Glenn Casada. He advanced to Speaker of the Tennessee House of Representatives, placing him at the top tier of state authority. His influence was immense, his political network vast. Casada was a veteran lawmaker from Franklin, known for his conservative principles and his firm grip on the legislative process. His role as Speaker gave him significant control over the state's business and its budget, a position of immense public trust that prosecutors would later argue he violated.
The second key player was Cade Cothran, Casada's young and ambitious chief of staff. Cothran was seen as Casada's right-hand man, a political operative who knew how to get things done. But his career had already been marked by controversy. He had resigned from his official position at the Capitol in 2019, following a scandal involving racist and sexist text messages, as well as an admission of drug use inside his legislative office. Despite this public disgrace, his connection to Casada remained strong. He was out of an official role, but as investigators would discover, he was far from out of the picture.
The third individual was State Representative Robin Smith. A respected lawmaker from Hickson, near Chattanooga, Smith was known for her policy expertise and her strong conservative credentials. She was a key ally of Casada and a member of his leadership team. Her involvement seemed to many surprising. She had a reputation as a serious and dedicated public servant. Her involvement in the scheme and her later cooperation with federal investigators remained a factual component of the affair. She was part of the inner circle, privy to the plan's creation.
Together, these three formed a powerful alliance. Casada held institutional power. Cothran possessed the operational know-how and a willingness to operate in the shadows. Smith lent her credibility and her position as a sitting lawmaker to the enterprise.
Prosecutors alleged that they conspired together, believing their combined influence and insider knowledge would shield them from scrutiny. They allegedly leveraged their positions not for the public good, but for personal financial gain. It was a partnership that would ultimately lead all three of them into the crosshairs of a major federal investigation.
The plan itself was surprisingly simple, yet deeply cynical. It exploited a system designed to help lawmakers communicate with the people they represent. Every member of the Tennessee House is given an annual allowance, a taxpayer-funded budget of $3,000 to spend on mailers and other communications with their constituents. It's a standard practice in many legislatures. The idea is to keep voters informed.
But Quesada, Cothran, and Smith allegedly saw it as a pot of money ripe for the taking. They identified an opportunity for personal gain while abandoning public service. They created a company, Phoenix Solutions. This company would offer mailer services to fellow lawmakers. On the surface, it looked legitimate, but it was a complete fabrication. Phoenix Solutions had no real office, no staff, no history. It was a ghost company. And at its helm, operating under the fake name Matthew Phoenix, was Cade Cothran.
The alias allowed the plan to proceed. Cothran's reputation was toxic after his previous scandal. The group knew that if other Republican lawmakers knew Cothran was running the company, they would refuse to do business with it, and the scheme would fail before it even started.
The operation was put into motion. Smith and Quesada allegedly used their influence to promote Phoenix Solutions to their colleagues in the House Republican caucus. They presented it as a new, reliable vendor that could handle their constituent mail needs. Lawmakers, unaware of the deception, began signing up. State funds, the taxpayer money from those $3,000 allowances, started flowing to Phoenix Solutions.
In 2020 alone, the company received nearly $52,000 from the state. It also secured over $100,000 in business from the House Republican Party's own funds, expanding the scope of the fraud. The money came in, and according to federal prosecutors, it was then divided among the conspirators. Cothran, as Matthew Phoenix, managed the finances. He then allegedly paid kickbacks to Quesada and Smith for their roles in steering business his way. The payments were disguised, hidden from public view.
In total, authorities said Quesada and Smith received over $35,000 in bribes from the profits generated by the fake company. On paper, the amounts appear modest, but these officials allegedly diverted public roles toward personal gain, while most Americans remained occupied with work and unaware. It was a closed loop of fraud, funded by the public and orchestrated by the very people elected to serve them.
Secrets like this rarely stay secret forever, especially in the modern political world and digital age. Whispers and suspicions began to circulate around Capitol Hill in Nashville. Some lawmakers and staffers likely grew curious about this new, mysterious vendor, Phoenix Solutions, that had seemed to appear out of nowhere.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation, long trained to detect such irregularities before recent damage to its credibility, took an interest. The federal investigation quietly started during the first Trump administration, long before the public knew anything was wrong. Agents began pulling on the threads of the story, following the money trail and connecting the dots. The investigation was methodical and patient. Federal agents collected emails, text messages, and financial records. They began interviewing people who may have had knowledge of the scheme.
The alias Matthew Phoenix drew sustained attention. Investigators worked to prove that this fictional person was in fact Cade Cothran. They mapped the company's origin, its promotional efforts, and the destination of funds. The evidence they compiled allegedly painted a clear picture of a conspiracy to commit fraud against the state of Tennessee.
The first major break in the case came in March 2022. Robin Smith submitted her resignation from the Tennessee House, triggering responses across state politics. Shortly after, she pleaded guilty to a single count of honest services wire fraud. As part of her plea agreement, she promised to cooperate fully with the ongoing federal investigation.
This established a new phase in the ongoing investigation. One of the three participants had flipped. Smith was now a cooperating witness for the government, providing an insider's account of the entire scheme from its conception to its execution. Smith's cooperation was supposed to be the nail in the coffin for Quesada and Cawthron. With her testimony and the mountain of evidence the FBI had already gathered, the case against them became significantly stronger.
In August 2022, a federal grand jury handed down a multi-count indictment against the former House Speaker and his former Chief of Staff. They were charged with a range of serious federal crimes, including conspiracy, bribery, kickbacks, and money laundering. The two men who once stood at the pinnacle of state power were now facing the full force of the U.S. justice system. With the indictments filed, the stage was set for a high-stakes legal battle. Glenn Quesada and Cade Cawthron maintained their innocence, preparing to fight the charges in court. The trial took place in spring 2025 and drew statewide and even nationwide attention. Federal proceedings brought fraudulent political conduct by public officials under scrutiny.
Prosecutors introduced evidence through financial documents and witness statements. The star witness, of course, was Robin Smith. She took the stand and detailed her role and the roles of Quesada and Cawthron in the Phoenix Solutions fraud. Her testimony was just devastating. Smith described how the idea for the company was born and how they all agreed to conceal Cawthron's involvement. She explained how they used their positions to solicit business from unsuspecting colleagues. She provided the jury with a first-hand look at the conspiracy.
The defense attorneys for Quesada and Cawthron fought back, attempting to discredit Smith and portray the situation as a simple political misunderstanding rather than a criminal enterprise. But honestly, the evidence presented by the prosecution appeared to be overwhelming. In May 2025, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty. Glenn Quesada and Cade Cawthron were convicted on all counts. The once powerful Speaker of the House and his top aide were now convicted felons.
The verdict was a resounding victory for the Department of Justice and a stark confirmation of the corruption that had taken root at the highest levels of Tennessee's government. For many, it felt like justice had been served. The system had worked. It had held powerful people accountable for their actions, sending a clear message that no one is above the law.
Several months later, in September 2025, the two men appeared before U.S. District Judge Eli Richardson for sentencing. The judge enforced penalties according to the findings. Glenn Quesada was sentenced to 36 months, 3 years in federal prison, and ordered to pay a $30,000 fine. Cade Cawthron, considered slightly less culpable perhaps, received a sentence of 30 months in prison and a $25,000 fine. The prison sentences were real. Consequences followed through. By then, proceedings displayed signs of finality. The criminals had been caught, convicted, and sentenced. But, in America's current political chaos and public division, the story was far from over.
Just 2 months after the sentencing, in November 2025, a development occurred, unanticipated by many, yet foreseen by some. Donald Trump, who had returned to the White House in January 2025, issued full and unconditional presidential pardons to both Glenn Quesada and Cade Cawthron.
Those familiar with politics found the news confusing, as did segments of the public who had followed the case. With the stroke of a pen, their convictions were wiped away. Their prison sentences were canceled. They were free. The pardons came so quickly after the sentencing that the two men had not yet even reported to prison. Suddenly, the entire outcome of the years-long investigation and trial was completely overturned.
The White House offered a justification for the pardons. An official statement claimed that Quesada and Cawthron had been significantly over-prosecuted by a politically motivated Department of Justice under the previous Biden administration. The statement presented the fraud charge against elected officials as insignificant, downplaying the nearly $52,000 in fraudulent state payments by focusing on a disputed net profit figure.
Cawthron embraced this narrative wholeheartedly. He updated his social media biography on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, to claim he was targeted by Biden's DOJ for standing with Trump. The narrative was set, they were political victims, not perpetrators of fraud.
Response from Tennessee and national audiences included disbelief and anger, including among senior Republican figures. The state's current legislative leaders, House Speaker Cameron Sexton and Senate Speaker Randy McNally, both publicly stated their disagreement with the president's decision. McNally said he would have advised against the pardons. Sexton was more direct, saying that Quesada and Cothran had been convicted by a jury of their peers and should not have received clemency.
These individuals did not appear among the president's main political challengers. They were fellow Republicans who had witnessed the corruption firsthand and believed the justice system had worked correctly. The pardons for Quesada and Cothran were not isolated events. They were part of a broader pattern of clemency for alleged and convicted fraud granted by President Trump since his return to office. Other controversial political figures, some convicted of corruption and other crimes, had also received pardons.
This set of facts suggested a willingness to use the pardon power to reward political allies and to push back against what the administration viewed as politically motivated prosecutions. Tennessee's aware public did not view this through a national political lens. It concerned a direct local and public trust betrayal that remained without consequence.
In the wake of the presidential pardons, a glaring question emerged. What about Robin Smith? She was the one who had admitted her guilt. She was the one who had cooperated with the FBI. Her testimony helped unlock the case and secured the convictions of her co-conspirators.
Yet, while Quesada and Cothran were celebrating their newfound freedom, Smith was still facing the consequences of her actions. Her sentencing was scheduled, and she had received no presidential pardon. The person who helped the government was the only one left to potentially go to prison.
The situation was deeply ironic and to many profoundly selective. Smith had taken a huge personal and professional risk by cooperating. She had turned against her powerful political allies. She had subjected herself to public scrutiny and ended her own political career.
In the justice system, cooperation is supposed to count for something. Defendants who help prosecutors typically receive lighter sentences as a reward for their assistance. Smith had held up her end of the bargain, but now, the very convictions she had helped secure were gone, erased by presidential decree.
Smith had also sought a pardon from the White House, just as Quesada and Cothran had. But her request was denied, or at least ignored. No official reason was given. One can only speculate about the political calculations involved. Perhaps her cooperation with what the administration called a politically motivated investigation made her ineligible for mercy in their eyes.
Whatever the reason, the outcome was stark. The two men who fought the government, who were convicted by a jury, and who claimed to be victims, walked free. The one woman who admitted her wrongdoing and helped the government was left behind.
As her sentencing date approached, Robin Smith faced the very real prospect of being the only person to serve time for a crime all three had been convicted of committing. Furthermore, she had already paid over $28,000 in restitution to the state of Tennessee, returning the money she had gained from the scheme.
Quesada and Cothran, due to their pardons, paid nothing. They were not required to pay back any of the money. The disparity was staggering. It created a legal and ethical dilemma that would land squarely in the lap of the federal judge who had overseen the case from the beginning.
On January 5th, 2026, just yesterday, Robin Smith appeared in court for her final sentencing. Everyone in the courtroom, from the prosecutors to the defense attorneys to the reporters, knew this was no ordinary hearing. The original sentence she faced was up to 8 months in federal prison and a significant fine. But the pardons for Quesada and Cothran had changed everything. The fundamental context of the case had been turned on its head.
The presiding judge, U.S. District Judge Eli Richardson, was now faced with an unprecedented situation that tested the very definition of consequences, fairness, justice, and pardons. Judge Richardson acknowledged the bizarre circumstances directly. He stated that sending Smith to prison while her pardoned co-defendants walked free would constitute a manifest injustice. The phrase was powerful and direct. It was a clear rebuke of the outcome created by the presidential pardons.
A judge's role is to be impartial, to follow the law. But here, a strict following of the original sentencing guidelines would have created an outcome that was, on its face, deeply unfair. The judge recognized that the ground beneath the case had shifted in a way that the law had not anticipated.
Even the federal prosecutors who had originally recommended prison time agreed that the situation required a different approach. They joined Smith's defense team in recommending a sentence of probation. It was a rare moment of agreement, a collective acknowledgement that imprisoning the cooperating witness would be a perversion of justice.
The government's own lawyers admitted that the pardons had created a disparity that needed to be addressed. They recognized the potential damage this situation could do to future investigations if potential witnesses believed that cooperation could leave them worse off than those they testified against.
In the end, Judge Richardson made a decision that resonated with common sense and a deeper sense of equity during chaotic pardons. He resentenced Robin Smith to 1 year of probation. He waived the fine. He noted that she had already paid restitution, unlike her former partners in the scheme.
While he could not undo the presidential pardons, he could exercise his own judicial discretion to prevent a further injustice. His decision was a quiet but firm stand for fairness in a system that had been thrown into disarray. It was a moment where a judge stepped in to restore a small measure of balance to the scales of justice.
Today, the legal drama may be mostly over, but the fallout is not. Glenn Quesada and Cade Cothran are free men, their federal convictions a thing of the past. Robin Smith is serving probation, forever marked by her role in the scandal, but spared a prison sentence.
The Phoenix Solutions case remains in Tennessee's record as an example of corruption and a bizarre lesson in the unpredictable nature of justice. To those who paid attention, it has left deep scars on the public's trust in its elected officials and in the fairness of the legal system itself.
The message this whole affair sends is complicated and, for many, deeply troubling. What does it say to future whistleblowers or potential cooperating witnesses? Robin Smith did what the system encourages. She came forward, she told the truth, and she helped hold powerful people accountable. And yet, she was almost punished more severely than those she helped convict.
Judge Richardson's final ruling mitigated that outcome, but the chilling effect remains. Will someone in a similar position in the future hesitate to cooperate, fearing they too will be left behind if political winds shift?
The political consequences are also still unfolding. The pardons have created a rift within the Republican Party in Tennessee. The state's own legislative Republican leaders felt compelled to publicly disagree with a president from their own party, a rare move during the Trump administrations. It shows friction between personal loyalty and the enforcement of law and ethics.
This scandal has forced a conversation about where the lines should be drawn, a conversation that is far from comfortable and far from over. It exposed internal problems within the political system.
Ultimately, this is a story with no clear heroes and a resolution that feels incomplete. It is a modern-day political tragedy, set to the somber classical music of unresolved questions.
It asks us to think about what justice really means. Is it a conviction in a court of law? Is it a presidential pardon? Or is it something more elusive, something found in fairness, accountability, and the simple, honest trust between the government and the people it serves? The Phoenix Solutions scandal has shown that sometimes that trust can be as much of a phantom as the company itself. This is the Ideologics team signing out. Thanks for watching. Stay aware, rise to the occasion. Godspeed.